For centuries, the Ottoman Empire was a power in Europe, often the superpower, seemingly invincible. Then, around 1700, the empire goes into this long decline. And by the time you get to World War I, thanks to wars with the Habsburgs and the Russians and wars in the Balkans and whatnot, the Ottoman Empire has lost almost all of its European territory. Okay, but this is a good thing, or at least this could be a good thing when it comes to World War I, because of course it puts the Ottomans out of the combat zone, so to speak, outside of the military alliance system that dragged everyone else into this, bloody mess. However, as we know, the Ottoman Empire did enter World War I on the side of Germany. Of course, this ends up being the losing side. A few years later, the Ottoman Empire falls, and we can tie that fall, we can connect that fall directly to the decision to enter World War I. So why enter the war when you don't need to? So in a world where 85% of, the land is being controlled by Europeans of one stripe or another, or Americans, maybe you're convinced you need a European ally. But who do you turn to if you're the Ottomans? Do you turn to the British, who are technically occupying parts of your empire? And they're in Egypt and Sudan, they're in Persian Gulf, southern Mesopotamia, and elsewhere? Do you turn to the French, who've also habitually, messed with your territory, who are in Lebanon, intervening, who are controlling most of the rest of North Africa, which used to be Ottoman? Do you turn to the Russians? The Russians who constantly seem to be invading your territory, who have plans on Istanbul or Constantinople, the Dardanelles, the Bosporus. None of this is a secret. There's evidence that all three, officials in London, Paris, and St. Petersburg, are salivating at the chance to dismember your empire. Do you turn to any of these guys? Now, what about Germany? Germany is the rising #1 power in Europe at the time, and Germany's never shown to have imperialist designs on the Ottoman Empire. In fact, Germany just invests in the Ottoman Empire and advises the Ottoman Empire, particularly how the Ottomans should deal with Russia and Britain and France. So far, the Germans have not tried to carve up the empire. And so when faced with a choice between these four great powers, who are you going to go with? Now, when war broke out, the Ottomans did not just jump right in. In fact, there was quite a movement within the government to keep the Ottomans out of the war entirely. But that relationship with Germany was very important, but it was fragile. It might not, survive if the Ottomans stayed neutral at this time of German need. And so, to maintain and preserve that critical relationship with this European power, joining the war just might be a necessity. Add to that the idea percolating, in some circles in the Ottoman government, that war might actually be just the thing the Ottoman Empire needs to unify itself. The Ottoman Empire dealing with a lot of disunity, discord, various groups and nationalities. This is an age of nationalism, an age of anti-colonialism, and the Ottoman Empire itself has not been immune, not by a long shot. Well, maybe the battlefield can be a great unifier. The war also offered a chance to exact revenge. See, in the recent wars in the Balkans, the Ottomans had lost virtually all of Rumelia, what the Ottomans called their European holdings. And in the process, their enemies had forced thousands and thousands of Turks and Muslims in general off their land, butchering many others, and often horrifically. And so there was this visceral need, it seems, among many in the empire to get revenge for these terrible acts of violence and displacement. Keep in mind, too, that the Ottoman government is controlled at this time by the Young Turks, and war offers a unique opportunity for aggressive, reform-minded people to carry out their plans, to centralize power, to remake a state in their image. This is something that's very difficult in peacetime, but during war, you can justify all sorts of things. So certainly the Ottoman government had its share of this sort of man. Ottoman entry into the war can also be interpreted as a nationalist move. And this was, in essence, a declaration of independence. After decades and decades, even centuries of foreign domination, perhaps the war offered a chance for the Ottoman Empire to emerge fully independent, fully modern, with a strong centralized government in Istanbul, with all of its disparate peoples standing behind it. Perhaps the Ottoman Empire could even win back some of that old Ottoman glory. And it's maybe in this context and all this complication that we should view the actions of Enver Pasha, which are so often portrayed. He's often portrayed as acting on his own. It's just him and the German ambassador and some other Germans who single-handedly dragged the Ottoman Empire into the war. No, it's much more complicated than that. And there were many who were overjoyed that the Ottoman Empire was suddenly in the war. Of course, there were also many who were dismayed that the Ottoman Empire was in the war. And it's true, the actions of Enver Pasha did ultimately have the effect of getting the Ottoman Empire into the war. That is true. So how did he do it? Desirous to join the bloody fray in Europe and convinced that a spark would be needed to send the empire over the edge and finally make that decision, Enver Pasha, of course those Germans he was working with, concocted a plan. We call it the Black Sea Raid. Of course, here we are at the Black Sea. And the plan was this: get the Russians to fire on the Ottomans first, thus providing a pretext for a declaration of war. Okay, so that was the plan. It helped that the commander-in-chief of the Ottoman Navy was himself a German who later admitted that one of his motivations was to get the Turks into the war, whether the Turks wanted it or not. Well, on 29 October 1914, the Ottoman Navy set out, officially just on maneuvers. Well, the Black Sea Raid did a lot more than just provoke some Russian vessel. No, under the leadership of this German commander-in-chief, this German admiral, these raiders full-on attacked, Russian seaports. Novorossiysk, Feodosia, Odessa, Sevastopol, Yalta, and these places were flat-out shelled. They were bombed by this naval force, this Ottoman naval force. It made a lot of people very angry. The Black Sea Raid also laid mines, whole minefields in the Black Sea. Destroyed a Russian minesweeper as well. The right people got mad. I mean, it worked. It totally worked. The British played right into their hands. Revenge attacking Turkish merchant ships off the coast of Turkey, off the western coast of Turkey, and declaring war on the Ottoman Empire. The Russians, of course, angrily declaring war within a few days. So it totally worked. The Ottomans were in the war. 9 days later, 9 whole days later, which is an interesting tidbit, the Ottoman Empire itself declared war. A momentous decision for modern history.